So we are
All right.
there, and now we're going to bring people in to join us. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Great to have you here. We'll just
hey guys,
leave a minute of space here for people to join in.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Wow, look at all these.
Oh, good to see you all. It's like all the new friendly faces I know now over the past many months that we've been doing this.
Hi, Nancy. Ron Engel.
Donna Bird, good to see you. Linda Kay, how's it going?
Hey, Lewis.
Larry
Hey,
Lobel.
Cyrus.
Raymond in there from South Africa. It's always good to have our multi-continental representation here. Okay.
Great.
Mr. Chamberlain.
All right.
Donna Bird. Hi, Donna.
I'm going to...
Carl Lieberman, the sage of Venice Beach, ladies and
gentlemen. Pooja, I'm going to make you a co-host, so if anybody else enters the waiting room while I'm talking, you can let them in. Okay, great. So I'll give a quick introduction, and then we'll dive right in today. Just to remind you, this is Piano Tech Radio Hour. It's being brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online educational resource that offers you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at www.pianotechniciansmasterclass.com, and I'll actually put a link in the chat there, so you can click on that link and visit the site, because from the main site there, you can click to our upcoming convention and you can join us. Right now, we're actually still running some early bird prices. You may have missed out on our early bird prices, but we still have a reduced rate right now for people who want to join early. So go ahead and take advantage of that right now. We have an excellent lineup of instructors, including our guest today, who I'll introduce in a minute. David Anderson's going to be there. We actually have a couple European instructors, a handful of European instructors this time around, which is new for us, and we're expanding our global set of the instructors that are joining us. So that's very, very exciting. So join us for that. And now I'll introduce our guest for today, and we'll get right to it. So our guest for today is David Clavens. He earned his degree as a master piano builder in January 1980 in Stuttgart, Germany, after having founded his first piano company in 1976 in Bonn, Germany. While initially specializing in the rebuilding of older pianos, in the course of his work, he has deeply studied the factors that determine the acoustic characteristics of a piano and developed what I would call an avant-garde brand of his own style of a piano. So we'll talk about Clavens pianos today. We'll talk about his history, and I'm sure you guys will have tons of questions about this fascinating instrument. It's actually really great to have you on the call, David. One of the technicians on my team came across one of your pianos in the past couple of months and in New York City, and was trying to figure out how to fix a sustain pedal, right? And so I think it's great to have you here. Now know you as a connection, we can actually give you a call and say, hey, how do I address this? So
sure.
It's good to have you here. Did you have anything you wanted to say up front to introduce yourself or to say hello? Or
I would like to say hello to everybody, that I'm very pleased to participate in such a fantastic intercontinental conference discussion, so to say, and I appreciate each and every question, each and every comment. Even if you don't like my pianos, it's not a problem. So I'm just happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion, and feel free to ask anything you'd like and what's of particular interest to you. Other than that, I guess that most of you know what I'm doing, building peculiar pianos, so to say, that look very different and sound pretty different from everything you typically know. But I guess that in the field of our peers, more or less everybody knows my pianos in the meantime. So I won't waste too much time to go into details for now, but
Hey,
should you have
Ethan,
questions about any detail, then please feel free.
excuse me, David, but Ethan, do we have a picture of David's piano of like
Yeah. Yeah, let me see if you're on your website here. This is not a bad place. Yeah, okay. I'll bring up your website real quick so people can get a feel for it. And so right now this is the model 450i. So as you can see, the sort of signature, one of the main signature characteristics of David's pianos, although he has some smaller pianos now, is that he creates very, very tall pianos that you tend to have to climb a staircase to play. And I'm just scrolling through images here to show you, a piano placed in a home, and just the sort of general concept of the Klam's piano. Here's a picture of his Unicorda piano, which is actually a recent development, which is not tall, but it implements some of his design features and such. So that's a little bit of an overview, and you can look up more of what he does online as well.
Essentially, you could also say that I'm engaged in both extreme ends of the piano. One is the softest sounding, smallest, or quite one of the smallest pianos and softest sounding piano. And the other is the opposite, the maximum sound power vertical concert grand. The M450i, the I stands for integrated, because the idea is that this piano needs to be, or should be ideally, integrated in the building, like the church organ. That's the idea, because it's too heavy to carry around. So the organs also, nobody wonders why you would install an organ in the building. So I thought by myself, when the piano gets too heavy, you also install the piano in the building. And the entire, maybe I do a small reasoning for the big piano. For the 450, my general take is that I think it's much more favorable for the audience to have a piano beaming directly into the public instead of against the floor and against the lid. And also the question, once you want to go big, like the 450 has 4 meters, close to 4 meters long, is the longest bass string. And if you want to do that at the grand piano, you would have, as you of course know, the longer the grand piano gets, the deeper the action slips inside. So if you would like this kind of scaling on a horizontal piano, you would have extremely long keys, which would make it very hard to play. At least virtuous playing would be close to impossible. If I build vertical, I can take essentially the same keyboard and action at any model, 3 meters, 4 meters, 5 meters. It's always the same action. It's just slipping upwards, so to say, when the piano gets bigger. And so the basic idea is to expand the soundboard to have much longer strings and thus thinner strings, which give a much more clear bass tone in particular, but also the overall dynamics of the piano are increased significantly. So that's the main idea, so to say, the ultimate concert piano. I myself, I like to compare it to the Formula One in pianos. So I deem every fine existing grand piano as fine limousines. But the Formula One, which is a piano that's strictly built by functional principles, function first, form follows function, so to say. In this case, in my view, it needs to be built vertical and needs to be big.
So on the topic of that form following function, I have a bunch of questions. I'll say two. You can pick which one you want to address. One was having the strings completely exposed. So traditionally, we have a way of covering the strings and covering the action. I was curious, reasonings behind that. Any issues you see with that? And the other one was just, we can get into it later too, how you decide then how long you want the keys to be, because then, it sounds like you have a little bit more discretion and you can decide how you want them to feel and construct those. But yeah, either one of those I think would be interesting to explore.
Yeah, sorry, yes, to start out with the exposed inside, so to say, of the piano, I don't consider it any problem, so to say. Most, let's say, typical housewives, they would ask, yeah, but how about dust? If you have the piano open, everything can be, dust can settle everywhere. And that's not really a problem because you can dust it off, first of all. Second, if you know, surely seen a lot of pianos from the inside. The casing of the piano doesn't prevent it from getting dust inside. So whatever, the older the piano you open it, you will have maybe a half an inch of dust at the bottom. So that's not really a problem, and it never has shown to be any kind of problem or whatever. No client of mine, let's say, has so far complained about it. And the point is that it's much more favorable for the sound. As we know, the main so to say, amplifier of the sound is the soundboard. And if you pack the soundboard into a box by casing the piano, then that, in my view, is a disadvantage. It has no advantages whatsoever. It was made basically the furniture, so to say, part of the piano was a necessity when the piano was developed, for sure. I mean, you cannot imagine that 100 years ago or even 150 years ago, anyone would have accepted such a piano like my own Accorda, for example, or the 450. People wanted to have it look neat, to fit into the style of their furniture, etc. But the most important, or the more important question, maybe more interesting, is about the, the keyboard and action definition. And I basically have compared, or in the course of my work, I compared a lot of pianos, grand pianos, all kinds of touch, let's say, characteristics. And I came to understand that you should not have a key that's longer than absolutely necessary for the sake of a fast action. I mean, we know that the upright piano action tends to be somewhat slower anyway than the grand piano action, though it must not be, because if you adjust the action by specific parameters, it can, no pianist can ever outplay my piano actions, or haven't ever. I don't know, maybe someone comes along at some point, so to say, by means of speed. The only thing is that the pianist needs to lift the fingers higher. Of course, the repetition of the upright piano action, at least if we talk about the traditional piano action, then of course you cannot, the repetition isn't that deep in the touch, so to say. You cannot lift the key just 3 millimeters and then you can hit again like with the grand piano. So naturally, it's more finger work for the pianist. He needs to lift his fingers higher, but that's just a question of diligence, so to say, and a little bit more work. And I came to understand that a key length of 410 millimeters, which I have actually, which I utilize.
So explain that again, David.
Which part of it? What part? The upright versus grand action kind of differences, or David Anderson? What was your clarification you were looking for?
I don't. I'm trying to picture how is the piano on is the action on the 450 basically an upright action?
Yes, it is an upright action. It has to be one, because naturally the piano is a vertical piano. And although I'm aware of some inventions and experiments with some modifications of the upright action that that could possibly, or that are meant to speed up the action to make repetition faster, I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't played every of these options, but one thing is for sure, that the more elements like springs you include in the action parts, the more resistance you also have when you touch the piano. So in a way, it may speed up the action. On the other hand, it's maybe counterproductive because it could make the touch too heavy. So
too resistant. Yeah.
Yeah, too much resistance. Like, for example, typical, you see it also at some old pianos, but also Sauter has invented such a spring behind the jack, at the jack, which actually is meant to push the jack faster back in its original position, in zero position, so to say.
Steingräber has one of those too.
Yeah, Steingräber also has their system, but I found that it's very much depending on the adjustment of the action, how fast the action is, and the upright action. We're talking it now the upright only. It's in particular, what is one crucial element is to adjust the catching of the hammer as much as possible towards the strings, as close as possible to the strings. Because that serves for repetition significantly. The more the hammer falls backwards, the more, of course, you have to let the key off to hit the tone again, so to say, to have a fast repetition. And if the catching happens too far away from the strings, let's say like more than half or even half is too much, then definitely the repetition becomes too slow. If the action is adjusted the way that you have the catching like 10 millimeters in front of the strings, then it's no pianist can outplay that by means of speed. I mean, nobody gets a problem by means of most virtual playing, so to say. That's one thing that is surely, let's say, a pianist who is used to perform on grand pianos. He always needs some time to adjust to the action when they get to the 450. But every pianist so far has accomplished it, and most pianists cherish the sound quality and the sound dimension that the 450 offers, much higher than the little disadvantage of having an upright action instead of a grand action. So to say, you can't have it all.
I'm fascinated.
Some compromise somewhere you have to make.
So I'm fascinated to hear some of the comments that the players make in terms of the tone and the oral, the sonic bubble that piano creates.
Yeah, the most pianists are totally surprised because before you experience the 450 live, it's hard to imagine the sound dimension, so to say. If you listen to the recordings that I have put out on the internet, or that also some others have put out, visitors who have recorded this and that, then essentially you hear the difference in sound characteristics. So, for example, you hear that the bass, in particular the lower bass, has much more clarity of tone, but you cannot, for example, if you listen to whatever audio system and you have a max peak for the music you listen to, and you compare any traditional piano recording and then you compare the 450, if the max peak it's maxed out evenly, then of course you cannot really hear the difference in that the dynamics create, the difference in sound dynamics and sound power. But and that's what surprises pianists most, is the power of sound altogether, and then also the carrying tone. The tone is, of course, because of the large soundboard and the long strings, the sound is more carrying, and the appreciation actually of the rather warm tone, regardless how hard you hit it. That's also one regular remark of pianists, one regular compliment, so to say. And of course, as we know, sound is in part, it's a matter of taste. Of course, if you have listened all your life to your favorite piano and you love that sound, you will always have sort of a little problem to switch to something else and appreciate that the same way. But what I have experienced, not only with the M450, but also with the Una Corda pianos, typically the longer the pianist plays, the more excited he gets. And in the end, you have to pull them away from the piano, otherwise they wouldn't leave. So, I mean, I'm surprised myself actually how positive the perception of the una corda in particular worked out. I was expecting, as I'm a notorious optimist, I was expecting positive resonance, but not that overwhelmingly positive like I experienced, and what I'm totally, of course, happy and grateful for such feedback. But I could just say I couldn't imagine. But in the end, just one final remark before I get to your questions. In the end, not in the end, but in the meantime, so to say, after having experienced the feedback from pianists and listeners to both the small pianos, the una corda, as well as the M450, is what people appreciate most is actually the difference in sound. The fact that, in particular, composers react very positively. They love the fact that they have a new sound they can work with, that they say they inspired to write different music, etc., etc. And so I think that's, in my view, if I would need, or somebody asked me for my advice to the piano industry, I would say the one main point to work towards would be to create new variations of piano sound. That could be one aspect of success in the future, more than any time before, in my view.
Before we go on, can you describe the unique nature of the sound of the unicorda, why it is?
Can I play? Well, actually, I was going to load up a clip maybe of the 450i. Do you mind if should we just play one and people can hear it?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was talking about the other piano, the little one, but
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, maybe I'll bring this one up now, and then maybe we'll cut out, ask some questions. Maybe I'll bring the una corda up as well.
Okay.
But let's see here. Oh, actually, let me make sure I'm sharing my sound. Share sound and video clip. Okay, perfect. I think you can all see that. Play. And then... I'd love to listen to that more. Yeah, you can really, I mean, the bass notes, they're just very clear, and it adds a certain, it almost, it's like a meditative kind of calmness to the experience of the bass.
Yeah, the main difference definitely in sound characteristics, you could say, is the clarity of the tone. If you, let's say you could start playing melodies from the very lowest octave, which doesn't make sense on any traditional piano because you have too much of dissonant partials in the lowest octave in particular. And because the long strings, I can scale them accordingly thin. So the thickest string in the 450 is only 2 millimeters in diameter total. So that's also the reason why I can use why I do use double strings from the onset, from the lowest A. We have double strings in the piano, which also is a unique feature of the M450, which you naturally cannot do with any other piano because the strings are too thick. And that's for power of sound, the 2 strings per note, and as well, the friends of prepared piano, of course, should be happy that they can prepare the piano from the lowest bass note and not only from the middle of the bass register.
Watermelon.
So, Ethan, tons of questions. You should get to those.
Okay, yeah, and I found a good clip of the una corda too. We can
una corda, awesome.
But yeah, let's get ahead of question here. because we've been ignoring them.
Yeah, I'm also reading the questions in the chat. It only takes
Oh, yeah.
a little bit time, but I should maybe get to these questions also.
Yeah, pick one if you like one. You can answer it, or I can read one out.
Are these questions, or is our broadcast accessible also after the fact? Is it somewhere saved that you can pull it up or see also the remarks, the comments?
Yeah, we can save. You mean the chat here, this text here?
Yeah, the question is, if, for example, if I can't get to any
Yes.
of the questions right now, then if I can reply later.
For sure.
That'd be possible, yeah.
No problem.
Good thought.
So let's see here. We have Cy Schuster asked, what are the challenges to regulating the 450 with such large string excursion?
Yeah, that's right. Actually, it's the only difference is that you need, compared to any other upright action, is that you need the let off a little bit in the base, in particular in the lowest base part, have it a little bit earlier compared to the typical, let's say, whatever, 2 or 3 millimeters that we typically use at the upright action. So that is a slight disadvantage if you want, but again, the advantage in sound quality and altogether, so to say, the gain in the sound experience definitely pays off for that. And
next question.
Next question is, since vertical action, what do you use for jack return?
Yeah, is it just the traditional little sort of funnel-shaped coiled spring?
Yes, the traditional springs, but I make sure that they are. We sometimes put somewhat higher tension on the springs than typically, or let's say typically they are in an average tension, and you can leave them alone. But if you add a little bit of tension by expanding those somewhat, let's say, until the limit where it makes sense and where it's also possible without bending or, let's say, destroying the spring, that definitely helps. I am thinking about magnets, and my life long, I would say, I was pondering on action improvements, and presently, actually, we are working on the prototype of a composite material action, which I hope very much that we will be finalizing the tests within this year. Composite material action, which in particular will get rid of the traditional pin and bushing system. Instead of the pins and bushings, my action will utilize plain bearings like they are used in machinery. And that's a concept that, in my view, should have been invented a long time ago, but regardless of the inventions that, I mean, Kawai does the ABS action, for example, but they still stick to the pin and bushing system. That, I think, is a big disadvantage. As we all know, the bushings tend to grow, let's say, if you get in humid circumstances, or they tend to wear out if somebody is playing very diligently, like 5-6 hours a day, then the pin bushings is the first thing that wears out. And so with the new action that we are working on right now, excuse me, prototyping right now, I am thinking of a magnet system for speeding up the jack movement. That could be a very, that's definitely possible. In particular, if you do we're, let's say, investigating several paths to produce the action. One way may be 3D printing, which allows the extreme variety of modifications and combinations of things and materials, etc. Depending on the final outcome of how we decide that the production of the action would be most, let's say, reasonable, also viable by economic considerations, then it remains to be seen what can be implemented or not. So, but that's a side note at this moment, talking about the jack. And then the
follow-up question on the action. how do those get produced? Do you produce those yourself with a team?
That
Do
was
you
my question.
outsource it to a manufacturer? Have you ever worked with I can't think of the name, Wessel, Nickel, and Gross or anything like that? These carbon fiber actions? Or?
Yeah, the Wessel Nickel Gross, they do only the grand piano actions, as far as I know. And
I think they have. Actually, I think they have uprights at the moment.
I have not looked into until, but I maybe should do it, and I will do it if they have an upright action in the meantime. With their grand piano action, I'm very dissatisfied. I would not recommend it and not use it. I have worked with those actions. That's why I know, in particular, that Hungarian piano project for which I was invited to Hungary, and how I got to Hungary and got stuck there, so to say, for 4 years. They switched from Renner actions to Wessel Nickel Gross at some point. And there's my main critique with the Wessel Nickel Gross action is that the repetition lever is way too soft. The construction of the lever, how it is arranged, so to say, from the lower level lever, and then they have like an angled part which leads to the repetition lever, and that gives in so much that you lose, I would say, even 30 to 40% of energy if you hit it hard. As long as you hit it soft, it's okay, it's not a problem. And then I have heard from peers that there also occur over time, they would occur some problems with the pins, but I cannot say anything about that. Just the idea, I think, is good. They're moving in the right direction, but the solution is not as consequent as it could be, in my view. And I think that given the materials we have at hand today, in particular also better solutions for the pins, the piano action basically can be built to such a perfection that simply nothing is to improve at that action, so to say. At the same time, making it durable for, let's say, 20, 30 years against wearing out, except the hammerhead. Hammerhead, in my view, must remain the traditional felt, hard-pressed felt, because of the voicing necessity, which always will be necessary with any instrument. And artificial material, however the sound would be, most likely it would be a bit strange anyway. But if you imagine any kind of synthetic material for the hammerheads, I doubt that it would ever be possible to voice it like typically you can do it, or have to do it with the traditional hammer felt. But in my action concept, the hammer would be the only traditional part. Everything else would be totally, absolutely improved to the utmost, so to say, durability and quality and functional quality of the action.
And did I miss it? Did you say that you currently outsource the production of the action to like a?
Your question was about no. We built the actions completely on our own. We order parts from Renner. Most of the action parts, the core parts, we order from Renner, and the hammer from Abel, because Abel, in my view, is the finest hammerhead that we have, that we can access. And I'm working with Abel since 30 years, since the onset, since Mr. Abel founded his company. I was using his hammerheads and also, sorry, I have to drink a little bit of water.
No problem.
I was utilizing the Abel company also for renewing hammer felt on all pianos, where it would often is a problem if you have a piano that has, for example, a relatively light hammerhead, and that's also important for the tonal characteristics of the old piano. Then it's often favorable to unmount the hammers and send them into Abel, and they refelt the original core of the hammers, and they do it very high quality. Anyway, Abel is producing our hammerheads exactly to my specifications regarding measurements, hardness of felt, etc., etc. And in the Unacorda, for example, we use a bamboo core. They have invented it since several years, the Abel company. And bamboo core, bamboo, in my opinion, is a quite ideal core for such a light hammer and a light touch piano like the Unacorda is, because it's very stiff at the same time very light, and so it definitely is an advantage for also again for the speed of the action. The heavier the hammer is, the more gravity factors or like inert factors you have also that would slow down the action. And so, in my view, sorry, I don't know what that is. It's not COVID, of course. In my view, the Abel hammer is definitely the best render for the core parts, and we order the center rail and all the single parts, and we manufacture the dampers ourselves, because the traditional damper, which is made for regular pianos, does not fit the concept of the Unacorda, and also not the 450. In particular, the bass dampers for the 450, they are significantly bigger, longer than the typical upright action would have. So these we produce ourselves, so to say. And then we we drill the action, the center rail, we mount all the parts, we adjust all the parts, so to say. The entire assembly of the action is we do ourselves. And that's also one reason, or let's say the works included when you adjust totally fresh parts that you get from the manufacturer. I think I don't tell anything new. You have the most, let's say, the significant part of the time goes for just correcting angles to make sure that every part sits in its position and 90 degree, etc. And sometimes you can't even get to that 100%. And that's one of the reasons why I was long time ago starting to think about the perfect action, so to say, where everything sits 100% in angle and 100%, let's say, functionally adjusted so that nothing remains unsolved, no problem.
I'm going to, I'll actually take a break. You can get a little break from talking for the moment too. I'll put a little sample of the Unacorda for a minute. And then for the people that are watching on Facebook and YouTube, unfortunately, we'll sign off early like we usually do. But if you do want to join us, there's a link in the chat where you can check in with the rest of us. So, but let me share the Unacorda so we can hear what that sounds like for a moment.